the new group of 5 extended works is called Energy on Stage, because each of them interprets as a specific modality of being on stage, both directly and indirectly, joining the music with other ideal presences. Or 2 rides for double bass, As 3 halves for solo electric guitar, C for organ, electric guitar, clarinet, contrabass and percussion amplified, G for 3 clarinet contrabass, Mu for solo percussion. I finished the first rite of Or, 35 minutes for double bass solo, and I've almost finished the second rite, about 21 minutes. Or is a reflection of the 2 principal roles of the double bass in the history of music: the intense unifying energy of its pedal sound and the basso continuo, which later became the walking and talking bass, as what secretly drives all dances. I have explored this double nature with its continuous and discrete sound, associating it with my study of the sacred role of the bull in many cultures, the bull being an animal that corresponds closely to the double bass in my opinion. Specifically, I've focused on the myth of the Minotaur. In this process, 3 lines of development began to interlace. The tense sound as a potent male urge to life. The articulation, the knot, the fold, as an exhaustible generative female principle. The labyrinth, the design and experience of it, as a Zardo's metaphor for composing. This interlacing generated a double vision that was paradoxically specular yet asymmetrical. In fact, one activates the other while simultaneously transforming itself. From the vision then resulted the 2 rites. The precise formulation of gestures that permits them both to emerge almost unscathed along 2 different roads. Taken together, by marking out a space and 2 paths within it, they aim to recall and protect the sacred origin of the desire. Kama, the first seed of consciousness, in Renaud's translation of the Rig Veda. Now, let's take a quick look at the others. In Oz, the electric guitar is understood as the instrument of the new church, where it has replaced the organ. I am of course talking about the original meaning of the word church, the Latin ecclesia, or community, but also the ritual space belonging to that community. Today, the electric guitar is the only instrument capable of attracting thousands of people into a stadium. The common thread in us is the hero of the Joseph Campbell's monument. After working on this piece for a number of years, I finished the preliminary studies, listening, selection and structure, and I have reached a good point with the instrument as well, regarding literary effects. Chi, or Ki, the life force, was the origin for the four others, which I came to consider as spacecrafts, each traveling towards itself. The piece developed out of my long-term interest in the organ as an instrument of the sacred, though today it seems both organs and sacred are nearly obsolete. Here are the relationships between the instruments. Ge, for 3 clarinet contrabass, sets out towards the breadth of the earth itself. You could call it geological music, music lasting an enormous amount of time. Mu, for solo percussion, is at the moment listening to the imaginary lost continent and, at the same time, the active void around which all Eastern thought revolves so consciously, and perhaps Western thought too, less consciously. I realize that it may seem useless to speak of unfinished works, but I'd just like to show you an image of what is evolving down deeper. I share with you my personal projections into the future that tend towards the infinite, because I am convinced that all works and projects, whether actually realized or not, grow concurrently, each at a different stage of definition. This doesn't mean that the unpredictable is excluded, but rather that the precise area of the work in progress should be contextualized and specified while still maintaining connection with the other areas that can fertilize it, so to speak. As I see it, music itself is a portion deeply connected with other portions to form a system, darshana, as it was called in ancient India, which I present here in 2 dimensions. It should actually be imagined at least as a sphere or a globe, if you like, with meridians and parallels that sink towards the nucleus in a web of increasingly interior relationships. Depending on how the sphere rotates, one area will come into focus, and relations with the others will be filtered through its particular lens. We could start this encounter over from the beginning, not using music as the lens this time, but instead using the listening, or the perception, or science, or pedagogy, or yoga. We would find so many elements in common and others more specific that we could return to music with a healthy collection of new seeds to cultivate. At this point, having reached my broadest vision, I'd like to move on from my own work to make some general considerations that sum up, and I hope, more clearly define everything we have heard and seen in this shortcut to the central chamber. If a piece of music reaches down deep enough, it is very likely that it will not only discover something new, and therefore original, since we are all different, but will also connect to a fundamental aspect of the theme being explored, transcending the initial, strictly personal needs. As the years pass, there will emerge from that depth a type of all-encompassing presence, a thread, a foundation. Around its axis, all the actions, thoughts, intuitions, and emotions of a lifetime simultaneously proceed and anchor themselves. We could perhaps call this axial listening or axial vision. While the image of an axis may be useful, it is still reductive, however. The true goal is to succeed in perceiving, even if just sporadically, the intelligence of the space-time continuum in which we live. But let's keep in mind that continuity does not mean homogeneity. On the contrary, it is connection, relationship, transformation. As composer, our music making is no more than a micro portion of all the music making going on in the world. We might say we are the exception beyond which exists a rule, one that is interpreted in countless ways but pervades the space and time of our great earth. Music is played, people sing it, dance it, and, more broadly speaking, leave it in movement. On what is our music writing based, then? Destined for an audience that almost always listens seated and immobile. This is an important question we must all ask ourselves. While I certainly have no definite answer, I do have some clues, and they are incorporated in the title of this talk. Written music as living bridge. But what does that mean? Why written music and not simply music? Writing music, which means to some extent separating the act of imagination from that of execution, belongs to one of humankind's most defining traits. The capacity to think about ourselves, to see ourselves seeing, feel ourselves feeling, and of course, listen to ourselves listening. So is it possible to imagine music that listens to itself regardless of genre or function? I don't know, but it is surely possible to imagine a music that knows many other music, so to speak, both similar or different from itself. A music that is simultaneously a memory of others and a new perspective on listening. And what traits should written music with this approach have? Novelty and beauty, in each ostensible repetition from one concert to the next, and thus the capacity to overcome the specific situation that generated it in order to participate in a broader context, becoming not only a reference but also a stimulus for the music to come. What traits should the practice of writing music have? An openness to explore, to go beyond and deeper than the already said, the already done, even beyond one's own skills, and come closer and closer to whatever it was that initially attracted us to that specific material. I believe that the role of the composer should be to contextualize, integrate, and go beyond the standard interpretations of the various elements involved. Not unlike the theoretical physicist, the composer should formulate new possible relations on the basis of valid data, which musicians, like experimental physicists, then have to the job of proving. We don't need thousands of written pieces that last the length of a concert. This function is already brilliantly fulfilled by good improvised music. On the other hand, we desperately need pieces that last for decades, that is, pieces that can listen to the present within a much broader perspective. In this way, written music, despite being such a minimal percentage of all the music in the world, could become a center from which all music making can be perceived differently. With the expression rhythm music, I associated the metaphor of the bridge. Rhythm music as bridge. A bridge between two times, the writing and the concert, two places, the composer's studio and the stage, two people, the composer and the player, but obviously it is much more complex. There are actually more than two times, more than two places or people. Instead, they are areas and dimensions brought into contact by the writing. But where is this bridge actually located, and how does it bring into contact diverse areas if it is not a part of any of them? I would hazard to answer that it is everywhere. And every work of art is a key to this everywhere. We could define poetry as something that pierces and joins the apparent diversity and separation of dimensions. Great poetry in words, music, and images always bring us here, a here in contact with everywhere else. And finally, I'd like to elaborate just a bit on the quality of living that I associated with the image of the bridge. This is a bridge that surely lives through the experience of each of us, composers, instrumentalists, musicologists, and listeners, in the different roles we embody depending on the occasion, but that in the case of rhythm music also lives through the experience of our predecessors. Even stranger, it lives through the experience of those who will come after us, because future experience is already partially contained in the present, just as each of us always starts from something that was there before us. I'll conclude here with something that concerns me deeply, something that guides me from one piece to the next. Beyond all our academic obligations, beyond all the competitions and commissions and chance occurrences, there is something that calls us, something that is in need of all our talents and all our efforts to express itself. As I see it, a new rhythm piece is only necessary if it manages to become the body and voice of this call. If it succeeds in further revealing how much we are an integral part of a deeply connected whole. The existence of each one of us is in itself a demonstration of this reality, but it's up to us to perceive it and interpret it for ourselves.